Manuela. I'm a program manager on the Power Apps Customer Advisory team, and I'm here today with Jennifer.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Monroe, and I'm president of Alchemy Automation.
In this video, we'll be talking about how the CoE Starter Kit automates the process of the admin building a bigger picture of what apps and flows they have in their tenant, what they're used for, and gathering compliance and support details from their makers.
A frequent question that I get when talking with customers about managing their Power Platform and their tenant is how to identify and deal with objects that are heavily used in their tenant. So they want to be able to know those Canvas apps, for example, that are heavily used so that they can make sure that they meet their requirements for security and support and service maintenance.
That's right, and Power Platform adoption can only securely increase if admins have confidence in the solutions that are created by their makers. Typically, there will be many apps and flows in a tenant, and the Power Platform admin might not know what all these apps are intended for, how they're supported, or what should happen if this help desk is called about a specific application. Sometimes they're unclear if the apps are being maintained by the makers, by the department, or if they're even used at all still, and to what kind of standard they're maintained. From the Power Platform Admin Center, they can get details about the description, the connectors that are used in an application, or even the number of users that the application is shared with. And they can retrieve a few more details using PowerShell, but they will need to communicate directly with the app owners or the flow owners to fully understand the situation around the application. Is it business important? Is it critical? Is there a mitigation plan when there's downtime to the application? What's the kind of workaround, and what's the expected level of support for that application? Especially in a larger organization, it's not really feasible for the Power Platform admin to reach out manually to each and every maker that they have in the organization and gather those details. And the details can't be stored in email conversations. So there really is a need for a central catalog of those of that information.
So, since we realized that this process was needed, we've built it on top of Dataverse, and we use business process flows and Microsoft Power Automate in order to drive the processes.
Yeah, that's right. So the CoE Starter Kit has actually implemented the process for app and flow compliance using apps and flows itself. So there is a flow called admin compliance detail requests, and that is used to iterate through all the apps and in the tenant, check whether they are compliant against thresholds that the admin configures, and asks the makers to submit business justification details and further information about their application. Um, these details are sent if the application is shared more broadly or launched broadly. And then the maker is prompted to provide those details using a Canvas app called the Developer Compliance Center. And they can fill out the details there and submit the form for the admin to review.
And then once the maker has provided those business justifications, the admin will be notified that this has happened, and they can go and view these in the Power Platform Admin View app in order to look through the justifications that were provided by the user, see if how it should be classified, and then also if it should be featured in the app catalog.
So part of this process is automated, so we can kind of automatically figure out how if an application is shared more broadly and trigger that process. But admins can also manually trigger that compliance process if they want more information about an application, but the application doesn't fall within the threshold, so they can manually kick off that process, and then the maker is guided through the same, gets the same email and is guided through the same process in the compliance center.
Involved in the process then are the makers who receive this email and are able to go and provide this information into the Canvas app. And then the admin, they work with the admin who will review those justifications and those details in order to achieve the best solution for the tenant as a whole.
Yeah, that's right. So we find that Most often, the details provided by the makers are then used by admins to provide the best possible support for the solution. And that can be, for example, getting the help desk involved, getting a support team involved, or migrating the application to a different environment that has stronger support boundaries around it. Right, let's first look at the maker point of view of this process. So as a maker, I will get an email that looks similar to this for various objects that I'm the owner of. And it tells me that my admin wants more details about the app flow, desktop flow chatbot that I own. That asset is currently missing compliance details, which are needed for the admin to audit the application per the support policy. And you're then guided to open a developer compliance center application and provide those details. And I get information about the app workflow that has triggered the process and what environment that is in. So I can click on the link here, and that takes me to the Developer Compliance Center. So from the Developer Compliance Center, I can look at all the different resources where I'm the owner of. And by default, I only see apps where my admin has requested compliance details. So I can select one of the applications there. I can see that this application is currently flagged as inactive, so that means it's up for deletion. I can see some more details about the application and who the application is currently shared with. And I can provide the support details that the admin has requested. I can also upload a mitigation plan or other files here, like a user manual, etc. Anything that might help the help desk in supporting this application. And I can provide a category for this as well. From here, I can submit those details. So I'm all done with that process here, and I can go through other applications and provide further information for those. And then from an admin point of view, I've got the Power Platform admin view that's part of the core component solution. So I can launch that to review the details that have been provided by my maker. So in this case, the maker has provided details about a Canvas application. So I can go to the Power Apps tab here. And I'll switch the view to compliance submitted. And I can see here that a maker has submitted details for this application. I can open the app here, and I can review the details that have been provided by the maker. I validate that the maker has provided the details, and then I perform a risk assessment on that application. So the maker has said that the application is important and the data classification is confidential. So I'll say that the risk is moderate. I can from here quarantine the application. So if I'm not confident that the application is meeting my support requirements, I can quarantine the app, which means that end users can no longer launch the application, and I can then work with the maker to bring that application back into compliance, for example, by implementing application lifecycle management or setting up a production environment or setting up a support team for that application. In this case, I'm fine with the maker supporting the application, and I'll store the risk assessment. If I think that the application could be of more broader use to my organization, I can choose to highlight it in a central app catalog. Since this is a departmental application, I will skip that step and just finish the assessment here. And now that decision is recorded for future purposes. So in 6 months' time, if I'm wondering what that application is doing, I can go back in here and review the details again, and it's not kind of stored in emails and may be lost. So on this page, you might notice that the risk assessment state here is still submitted. There's a process running in the background that once you've completed the business process flow at the top here, updates that to complete, but you won't see that kind of immediately. One thing we've also talked about during the presentation was manually requesting those details. So the way to do that is browsing the applications here, picking one that you want to request those details for, and simply changing the risk assessment state here from none to requested. That starts the business process flow, and the maker will receive the same email that gets sent automatically. They are guided to the developer compliance center and asked to provide those additional details. So that's all it takes from here is changing the status to requested. Right, let's briefly recap the process. So there's a weekly process that checks if apps or bots meet the thresholds to request compliance, such as being shared with more than 20 users or being launched more than 50 times. If yes, makers are prompted to provide additional compliance details via an email, and they're then providing those details in the Developer Compliance Center. An admin uses the Power Platform admin view to review those details and perform a risk assessment. If they approve those details, the process ends there. They can also choose to reject the details and re-request those details and putting the application back into that flow. There's an optional part of this process where admins can choose to quarantine applications either during the risk assessment, or they can also automate that to say if the maker hasn't provided the business justification details that have been requested of them, to quarantine the application until they do. This process is only available for Canvas apps at the moment, and it means that end users will no longer be able to use the application if it's quarantined. But that part of the process is completely optional, and you have to choose to turn that on.
So, like with everything else with the starter kit, this is intended to get you started in doing your compliance. And there's some configurations you can use to make this process your own. So, first of all, admins can exclude entire environments from going through this process. We've seen people do this for their production environments, and we've also seen people do this for the default environment because they want that to be a place where they play, and then they use other processes to determine if something should be moved to another environment altogether. You can also configure the thresholds. So, is it 20 users getting shared with that makes it important for you, or is it 200 users being shared with? That's another area of configuration that you can do, is determining what is a heavily used object. You can decide if you want to have the non-compliance lead to quarantine or not. That's an area of configuration. And then lastly, the area of being able to manually trigger. So one area that we've seen this a lot is that if an admin sees that an application and some flows work together to do some process, the application will get auto flagged for them, but its associated flows won't. And so they can go and trigger this process for the associated flows to ensure that they also meet the requirements of the tenant.
Right, I think that all makes sense. To learn more about the process, click on the link highlighted here to read through our documentation about the process, and to get information about further videos about the CoE Starter Kit. Please subscribe to the Power Platform YouTube channel. Thank you.
Thank you.